Here I am. Okay. Hello, everybody. It's Linda Ugolo. Welcome to the Delight in the Limelight show. Thanks for coming on or watching the replay. I'm a speaking confidence coach, author of the book Delight in the Limelight, and host of the Delight in the Limelight podcast. I and the guests I bring on are here to help you transform your experience of speaking from dread to delight, instead of hating it to loving it instead, whether that's on stage, on camera, in the media, or the meeting room. And today we're talking about how to be expressively, naturally, and unapologetically you. And here to help me is my guest, Laura Belgray. Laura is an award-winning copywriter, founder of the Talking Shrimp, Shrimp Club, which I've been a part of, author of Tough Titties on Living Your Best Life When You're the Effing Worst, which is coming out in 2 weeks. So exciting. She's written TV spots for clients like NBC, Fandango, Bravo, and now helps entrepreneurs find the perfect words to express and sell what they do in a way that gets them paid to be themselves. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you so much, Linda. Okay, there's one thing I have to correct, and I do this like every other podcast. It's Talking Shrimp, not the Talking Shrimp. And I don't know why it matters so much to me, but it does. I always feel, well, sometimes people will introduce me as the Talking Shrimp. And I'm like, no, I'm not a mascot of my business. The business is called Talking Shrimp. That's it. That's
Yes.
it. So that's why I'm jumping in.
I appreciate you saying
you.
that. And I actually have it written down as Talking Shrimp, but I think I got a little like nervous or flustered and the just came popping out.
I hope it's okay. I stepped in and corrected it. I can't let it go.
Absolutely.
I just cannot let it go.
It's
Also, I'm a
perfectly
corrector.
fine. Actually, I spent the last few days listening to podcasts that you've been on, and I heard you say that exact same thing.
That's so funny.
So I just finished your book, an advanced copy, hilarious, so out there. I just feel so grateful for you to being like on the forefront of like sharing your life in the way that you do, because I feel like it gives us this enormous permission slip to set the rules and boundaries of what we allow ourselves to share of ourselves in a different way. It's like we set the rules for ourselves. We think they're this wide, it's pretty narrow. And then we say, ooh, could I do that? Could I run down this hill? Could I roll in the grass in public? And then reading the kinds of things, your misadventures, it's like, oh yeah, I think I can do this. Floor can do that. I think I can do this.
Thank you. Yeah, I was hoping it would be permissive, because I love that feeling when I'm reading something that makes me say, oh, I can write like this. You can write that. You can say that. And for instance, Samantha Irby's books make me feel that way. And they are, you think I'm a TMI queen. She is like next level. I mean, her books tend to be about, diarrhea and her misadventures with public restrooms. Is a lot of it. And just the way that she shares gives me such permission to write the way I do, or anyone who's really open and raw like that, and writes as though they are talking to a very close friend.
Yes, a very close friend, someone who you feel comfortable sharing all the light and the dark, the messy and the neat, and it's all in there. Yeah. So one of the things that I want to talk about particularly, which I mentioned in the intro, is how can we let ourselves be more naturally ourselves, how we can feel more free to be me. And what I sensed from you is that there are ways that you had that sense in some part of yourself, even from when you were young, and then other ways where you didn't. Can you parse that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I think I started off being very much myself, always wanting to be different. And, as a kid, having weird obsessions and hobbies. I collected rocks. I collected comic books. I was obsessed with video games. When I went sneaker shopping, it wasn't to get the cool sneakers that anybody else had. It was to get sneakers that nobody had. And I mean, my mom would take me to Fava and I'd search everywhere for a pair that nobody else would have, like that I hadn't seen anywhere. So I was not interested in fitting in and being on trend and being cool. And then in 6th grade, my bully, who I write about in the first chapter of Tough Titties, Deb Fishbone, stole my best friend, kicked me out of my friend group, and made my life hell for that year. And probably the worst thing she did, I mean, every day was terrible. It's awful to be kicked out of your friend group. I mean, it really strikes a chord in that primal part of our brain of like survival.
Yeah.
But I would say that the worst thing that she did was that scarred the deepest. It's when I had just gotten back a creative writing assignment and probably got an A on it. And it was a short story called Liddy and Me. And it was pure fiction. It was about a girl named Liddy, not Laura, who went to a different New York City private school, not mine. So it was fiction, and she ripped it out of my hands. I was holding it in the cafeteria, and she was like, "Liddy and Me, what's this?" And then, just had a knack for turning to just the right page. And she read a passage out loud that said, "I have good friends, but I feel like I'm losing them slowly." And she looked up at me and said, "This is you." And I was like, "Oh my God, no, it's not. It's fiction. Duh. Like, you don't know what fiction is, do you?" And she was like, "No, this is you." And that was just a moment for me that really imprinted in my mind the idea that it's not safe to be yourself. It
Yes.
wasn't safe to be me. It's not safe to stand out. You have to fit in at all costs. And that stuck with me for a long time. And it's still in me. I just have to try and calm it. Um, like it's kind of like a virus that resurfaces, um, every once in a while. But because it's not the right lesson, it is not the truth. It's the truth in 6th grade. But when you're an
Yeah.
adult, the key to any kind of success that I value in creativity, in life, in art, is standing out, is being yourself, and fitting in and being the same as anyone else is the kiss of death. And
Yes.
so I am constantly trying to come back to that place where I was before Deb Fishbone stole my best friend and made my life hell, where I just loved being myself and didn't even think about whether I was a weirdo, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you started with that because, the first part of my inner freedom framework is about revealing and healing. Like, when did you decide it was safer to hide?
Uh-huh.
And it's that exact kind of experience and experiences like that where we learn that it's not okay to be ourselves. It's not okay to speak up or express ourselves the way we do, or somehow it's dangerous to be the center of attention in a
Yes,
particular way
because
where
right. No, sorry, go ahead.
no, it's
I cut
okay.
you off. No, I was gonna say we at some point pick up the notion that one person disliking you can ruin your life.
Yeah.
And it's not true. It's just, I mean, it is true in 6th grade. It can be true. But when you're an adult, it is not true, unless they sue you. I like to say that's why I don't use Deb Fishbone's real name. Um, and she is litigious. I've Googled, but it's, it's still in me, that fear of being disliked. And if somebody writes me a nasty email or leaves a bad review or something, and I happen to see it, I'm trying not to read my book reviews at all, but anyone with unkind words or even critical makes me feel that adrenaline prickle of like danger, you know?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's still alive, and I think that's one of the things that we don't always appreciate, that even though we are older, even though we know better, even though we have these different strategies to help us navigate and we have other values that we live by, that 11-year-old or 6-year-old self didn't know that, and it still kind of lives, as you say, like a virus, or I would say kind of in our neurophysiology in a kind of a pattern that under the right trigger, it's right there.
Right.
Right.
Just like
Yeah.
shingles.
Just like I was I was yep, just like shingles, which hopefully we won't
Yeah, I
get
hope not.
either. No, away. So you did have what I was really impressed by in reading the book is just your commitment to that original knowing of yourself, of knowing that you wanna do what you wanna do in the way you wanna do it, and I was so delighted every time you would run into somebody and say, "That's a job? You can get paid for that? I'm in," and it's like it was like you held out, you really held out with, both fists for the experiences that, mm, you talk about how your dad made you go through what color is your parachute? And, it's so sweet, like, they were so supportive, they didn't know how to really support you, but they were doing what they could, and, and that you did in fact have the space to muck around until you discovered this thing that you just knew must be out there, even though there was nobody in your life who could say to you, if you like to write, there are these 25 different ways. Now you could go into Chat GPT and say, what are the different things I could do if I like to write? And it would spit out 100 different things. And you go, oh, cool, I can do that. But at the time, you didn't have that.
No, didn't have an internet, period,
Right.
when I got out of college, nothing like that, so I would look through the classifieds. That first year out of college when I was pretending to pound the pavement, I told everyone I was pounding the pavement, which meant that I spent, like, all of one day looking for bartending jobs, in my neighborhood. I would I tried looking at the classifieds pretty much every day. Open the classifieds looking for any kind of job that looked like it was appealing, creative, something that would use my writing skills, but I didn't know in what way. I didn't know what I was looking for. Oh, anything that would catch my eye would be something that said creative opportunity or yeah, usually creative person wanted, but then it would always say something like there would always be a deal breaker, like must be a self-starter or must be detail oriented. I was like, nope, that's not me, and that's not me. And most of them would turn out to be opportunities to sell printers or do phone sex. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
so
Well,
I didn't apply.
like, so what you're saying is, like, you knew yourself. It was like this what I felt like I was so impressed by is that you were committed to staying true to yourself because someone else, might say, "Well, I'll try to be that way. I'll be whatever you want." I will mold myself to to succeed as other people are expecting me to succeed. But you said, "Uh-uh,
Can't,
I
can't do it. I
can't
cannot
do it."
be anyone but me. And there are some people who excel at being whatever you want them to be. And those are the people who are great at rising up the corporate ladder. Um, I don't know if do you watch Succession?
Begun.
Yeah, because there's someone in it that Tom Wamsgans, who is that person. I mean, he's also a snake and a loser.
Is this
But
Matthew Macfadyen?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. But his strength is in saying, "Oh, I'm whatever you want me to be. Whatever it takes to secure my job and move up and please you, that is what I will do." And that is the opposite of anything I've ever been. I had friends who were great at being assistants and would get promoted and promoted and promoted because they could be whatever you wanted them to be. They could anticipate your needs, be there early, never mind on time, which is something that I couldn't muster. And, probably have your coffee waiting for you. I always think about like The Devil Wears Prada, where she has to, like catch the coat, bring in the coffees, brief the person, know everything that she needs to know. I mean, she really works her way up in that job and endears herself to the boss, to Meryl Streep, because she's that kind of person. She's like a go-getter who can go get your coffee. And I've never been that and just can't.
So do you think that there's a way to marry the 2 together? Like, what if you are working, like, I know you work mostly with entrepreneurs, but you have
Yeah.
also worked in the corporate, you know, venue, and do you think that there's a way to be yourself, to bring more of what's naturally you and also be part of a team, or, what would you say?
I think, sure. I think some people are great at that. And I was fully myself, I think, in the job in when I was working in TV promos and I was working at Nick at Night and TV Land with people who got me and I felt close with them. I felt like it felt like a family. And I would say I was fully myself, and a decent team member, not the perfect team member. And I would sometimes let things fall through the cracks. People would have to nag me about my deadlines. Sometimes I was accused of creating insider culture, when like a bunch of us I guess we came off as cliquey when we were in the edit room, etc. But I still succeeded there being myself for a very long time. And so I do think that that's possible. I also think it's possible for somebody like, who is that person I described, who is the promotable, needs anticipator, the person who will, get the coffee and get the report done and work overtime and get it all done. I think it's possible that that person is being themselves.
Yeah,
Like
true.
that's not necessarily somebody who's molding themselves to fit I think Tom's character in Succession is definitely who is he? Nobody really knows who he truly is, except maybe towards the end we find out. But um, I don't think that that is the rule, that somebody who succeeds in that way is necessarily betraying their true nature or betraying
Right.
themselves.
Right, so we don't have to be, like, different than everybody else. I mean, we are by nature different
Yeah.
from anybody else, but to kind of own who we are, who we like to be, how we like to be, and, whether that's working, as you say, in the company culture and you feel like you're part of the family, or you just, own the space that you take.
Yeah. And I think that there are a lot of people in jobs where they can't be truly themselves. And it's possible that being fully themselves might not lead to career success in certain work environments. And that's too bad.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anyone who's in a job where they can't be totally themselves should just quit. So I don't know your circumstances. I don't know if you can afford to quit. I don't know what opportunities you have. But I do think it's not healthy. It's not emotionally healthy to be in a place where you feel like you're not being yourself.
Yes, and a lot of times, I mean, I've had, people on the show who advocate for, uh, people, who aren't white male, who sometimes feel that way in the culture of the company, that
Yeah.
it's not okay to show that, um, they came from another country, or, they have a background of a certain sort, and so they can't really they don't feel like they can fully do that. But hopefully, I
Yeah.
mean, one of the things that I'm trying to do on this show is help people to find their way with it, so that we can create not just an outer safety, how to like redraw the lines of where we feel like the rules are, so we can bring more of ourselves. Because a lot of times we think that the rules are only go so wide, but they actually can go wider. People may be afraid to say, um, I'm Jewish, or I'm from Ecuador, or, we
Right.
say, someone's gonna say something negative about it. But in fact, a lot of times if you say, "Oh, I just celebrated Seder and I make a filter fish by myself all, every year," or something like that, that's of interest. And,
Yeah.
suddenly you realize that you can bring more of yourself and people will appreciate it, and have their perspective widened by us sharing more of who we are.
Yeah. And I mean, being from New York and having lived here my whole life, it's hard to imagine a place where you're jeopardizing your success by saying I'm Jewish. Uh, it's more like, but like mispronouncing challah would be grounds for getting fired in New York. But um, I think that the challenge comes in not so much for people, not so much in sharing their culture, talking about things like that, but in maybe speaking the way they do with their friends, or speaking
Mm,
like being naturally themselves, maybe whether they have an accent, or they have to code switch, because they're a person of color, and they would definitely speak differently around their friends and family than they do in a white environment. I think that, like, that's something I have real empathy for, and don't really have a like advice for, because I think that it's true that somebody might think less of you at work, especially if they're somebody who is hiding who they are and has been taught to do that. Um, I think if you are fully yourself and the exact person that you are
yeah.
around the people you're comfortable with, it's tough. It's why I don't like corporate life. It's why I can't thrive in corporate life, and never, and just am sort of repelled by it.
Hmm. Hmm. You want to have free reign.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So let's just turn the kaleidoscope a little bit. How do you think about caring? I mean, you started off saying, "Oh, I do care whatever people think about my book. I don't want to read reviews if they're negative, or if someone writes me an email, in response to something I say that's negative." I have to say, so I've been mentored by you, and one of the things that I found very helpful is how you say, "Oh, yeah, I get unsubscribes all the time." It's just like, poof, big deal. And so I was surprised to hear you say that, because to me, I felt like that was so helpful. The idea of, like, every time, like, almost every email, you get unsubscribes. That's just the nature
Hmm.
of email and the life we live with. And so how do you kind of navigate that path of caring less about what other people think? Because clearly there are ways that you don't.
Yeah, I have to talk myself down constantly.
Mm,
I have to talk
mhm,
myself out of it. I mean, I got an email the other day that wasn't nasty, but it was about my piece in Elle magazine. About it was The headline of it was, "Why won't people just let me not be a mom?" And it was about people wanting to force this, cloak of motherhood on all of us, whether we have kids or not. And I was insisting, and like, no, I'm not a plant mommy. I am not a fur mama. And no, I didn't birth my new book. And someone wrote to me, all the, if, across the board reactions were positive. And then I got this one email saying, you sound, you sound unnecessarily angry in this piece. I'm puzzled. And so it wasn't nasty, but it was like, screw you. And I wrote back asking, like, where in it do I sound angry? Because that's not my tone in it. And then she wrote back saying, with another example of something she didn't like. She didn't address that at all. She was like, there was one time when, I've bought everything of yours. And one time you know, like, I can't remember even what her criticism was, but it was like something that claims I said on social media, saying I was bored with my work and my life. I'm like, that doesn't sound like me. It's not something I would put out there. And I asked, can you give me an example? And she didn't respond. No response. And it still sticks in my craw. Like, just little jabs like that, especially when they're not true, I get defensive. And I have
mm.
to remember, like, I just remind myself, like, who cares? Who cares that this person misinterprets things that she reads? And that's her problem, and if she doesn't,
Yeah.
and even if she were nasty to me and hated me, that's also her problem. It doesn't affect me. She's not in my life. She might be
Yeah.
on my subscriber list, but she's not in my life.
Yeah.
And, so I do a lot of just calming myself down because it does still trigger that, that shingles, um, of being disliked, the defensiveness shingles.
Mm.
And so I just remind myself, like, it doesn't matter if one person doesn't get you or doesn't like you. And speaking of Succession, I know people who don't like Succession at all, can't get into it, don't want to watch it, have no interest. And that doesn't make me feel defensive about Succession. Like, I don't spend my time thinking about, like, why don't they like it? Why don't they like it? What's wrong with it? I'm not thinking, oh, Succession should maybe retool. They're like, go back to the writer's room, redo this season because, or all of them, because that person doesn't like it. And so why do we think about ourselves? Like one person disliking us means we need to retool something or defend ourselves or fix it.
Yeah. I found it very helpful. I think it's something I read in Mark Schaefer's book called Known
Mhm.
about how to handle when people make comments, and I think it was something like, "Thanks so much for sharing your view," or, I appreciate you your willingness to put out an alternative, uh perspective or something like that. I would have
Yeah.
to look it up. I think I even quoted him in my book, but I can't remember it still because it is one of those things that you do kind of like, "Oh, okay, I wanna handle this in some way. What's the, what's a graceful way to handle it?"
Yes.
And that's my feeling always with speaking also is that it's fine to make mistakes. It's fine to have all of these. I mean, things happen, people. We can't please everyone. We know this, but we need to manage it in somehow. And so what are the ways that we can do? One of the things that I like to do is I don't know if you've ever done EFT or emotional freedom technique, but at
I've
the
done.
beginning you kind of like tap on your hand and you say even though. So
Mhm.
when as you were saying that to me, I was like in myself thinking, "Oh, I would at night be saying like even though this person left that email or sent me this email, I love and accept myself just as I am.
I
Even
know.
though I hate when people send me these kinds of things, I love and accept myself." And I personally find that it helps me kind of acknowledge it and release it. But it may still come back. May still come back.
Yeah.
We may still need to work with it. And I think it is a process of us learning how to focus, uh, I don't know, what is it? Letting go. Letting
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, letting go. And look, I would love to be somebody who truly gave 0 Fs what anyone thought about me. Everyone talks about how like, when you reach 50, that's when it happens. You start, not giving a single shit what anybody thinks of you and being your true self. And I'm like, never happened for me. Not yet. I mean, I'm 3 years in and into my 50s and still haven't experienced that, but I do think I can override it. I'm pretty good at being myself and doing what I wanna do and putting out there what I wanna put out, even though I still care what people think and still
Yeah.
have a reaction
Yes.
based on it.
Yes, and we do care about others, and we do want, our material to resonate with people.
Yeah.
But it's just part of it. But when you write, what is the feeling of you writing and just, like, being in your zone? What does that feel like?
Depends what I'm writing. I mean, if I'm in the zone, if I'm writing something that I love and I really like how it's coming out, it's just bliss. That is my happy place when I'm writing something that I really feel like writing and I like the way it is coming out. And then it's torture if I don't and I don't know how to start it or I know it's getting long and boring and I don't know what to cut. I mean, writing the book was really challenging because unlike with an email, it kind of does have to be perfect. Like an email does not. An email goes out, you have a chance the next day to write something better. And same with a social caption or whatever, who cares? But with a book, it does have to be better. It has to be next, a different level. You can't have extra words in it. You can't have passages that bore people, or they will put it down and not finish it and not tell anybody that they have to read it too. So it's got to be meticulous, and that's challenging. I really like writing it. The first version of what I wrote mostly poured out of me, and that was super easy. I was just writing what I remember, writing what I know, and then making it really work on the page and work for the reader, especially a reader who doesn't know me. That was a whole other challenge.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I feel you because I've been there myself, except I didn't have that immediate first draft bliss that you did.
Right.
It was, but I was very dedicated. I was dedicated to not just making it something that people would wanna read, but I was dedicated to, maintaining the energy I wanted to be in while I was writing, and
Mhm.
that it took me a long time because it would take me a while to get myself into a place where I wasn't frustrated, angry. I would, be talking myself down all the time. I'd go, read my writing affirmations, or I would go into my journal and say, I would like let it come out in my journal. I'm trying to say this. I don't know how to say it. I don't know what to do. How do I get into this? How do you edit a whole chapter at a time when you can't even see the whole thing
Yeah.
on the screen? All these things are so frustrating.
Yeah.
And trying to, as you say, you have your reader in mind. You want to understand what it's like for them to go through it. And in a short, like, email, it's one thing, and in a chapter, it's another.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
so,
And yeah,
go
go
on.
ahead. No, I was gonna say your book is very a different style, where you are thinking about the reader from the get-go. It is for the reader,
Yes.
whereas mine was not written, what I first started creating was not written for the reader. It was written for me. Like, this is how these are stories I love to tell. This is how I remember it. Just getting it all out onto the page and making it as fun and entertaining as possible, which is about the reader, but also about like amusing myself. And then comes the next layer where it's like, it's not enough to just have a fun anecdote or a funny anecdote. You have to give it meaning. And so that somebody who doesn't know me will know, why am I reading this? They don't ask, why did I just read that? Why are you telling me this? They understand there's a point to it. It makes them think. And that layer is really, that's the challenge. That's what's hard to discover. Why am I writing this? Whereas you're
Mhm.
starting from, I need to tell them this. I need to tell them this. I need to tell them this. Crap, what order do I need to tell it in? And what's a story that might be an example of it, that might demonstrate it. And that's like the opposite direction.
Yes, yes. Well, I've heard you say, how important it was for you to write this book and not a book like mine, not a self-help or a business book, but I totally got it. I mean, these are stories that you've been waiting to tell,
Yeah.
like, all your life, and
Mhm.
and you needed a platform for it, and I'm so glad you did it.
Thank you.
I want to ask you, how would you describe your journey in being comfortable and expressing yourself speaking as opposed to writing?
I'm still in that journey. I mean, first of all, because I've never gotten in a groove of speaking all the time, like speaking, 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 so that I get used to it. And maybe I know there's some people who never get used to it. And uh, I've been more stop and start with long periods in between speaking gigs, so that it is like the very first time each time I get up there. And I feel like there are a few things more nerve-wracking to me than getting mic'd. Like, "Oh
Mhm.
god, here we go." And God forbid I speak after a bunch of people that I wanna listen to, because I'm in my head the entire time. And or, like, changing my speech as I'm listening to half listening to them, like, I should have made mine like that." And just thinking all my focus on myself until I'm up there. And then once I am this is one thing that encourages me to keep doing it, is that I know that once I'm up there, if I'm in a groove, if I'm getting response from the audience and I have a rapport with them, I love it like nothing else. It's the greatest feeling, and I come off the stage thinking, I got to do that more.
Yes.
But I but every time I have a speaking engagement, I wish that it would be canceled. There's so much apprehension around it, and like, is
Mhm.
my talk good enough? And I'll remember, a talk where, yeah, I got some criticism later. Like, somebody said, "Hey, I have some tips for you if you want them." Like, that first thing they said after I got off the stage, and that feeling so awful that it
Yeah.
really makes me like not want to get
Oh,
on the stage.
yeah, yeah, I think it's so important, and, uh, I mean, we put ourselves out publicly, and so people, will do what they do. But one of the things that I feel really strongly about is creating a space where people kinda well, gateless writing because 'cause you've been
Yeah,
part of gateless
sure.
writing with Suzanne Kingsbury, as I have, and, my work is dedicated to creating a safe space for people to speak. So what they hear in Comfy on Camera every day when they post is what people like, what people find interesting or strong or whatever. And so people want to make that new video because
Yeah.
they know they're going to get those goods afterwards, and it makes putting up a video one of the best things they get to do. It's like one of the fun things. And at the same time, they become more fluent, they build their skills, because they're looking at what they like, they absorb that as well, just like when we listen to other people read their writing. So,
Yes.
I do want to encourage you at some point to consider doing something that Andrew Davis, who is also one of my speaking mentors, I don't know if you know his book,
Yeah,
The
I
Referable
do.
Speaker.
Well, I know him. I've met
Mm,
him. I was in a program with him once, like a
cool, cool.
speaking
S
intensive. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So, oh, was that at HPS, at Heroic Public Speaking? Yeah.
It was with Amy and Michael.
With
Yeah.
Amy McAlport,
Yeah.
yes. So one of the things that I loved what he said was that when he's working on a new talk, he will give it as many times as he can in a short amount of time. So he'll go out and he'll book, I don't know if it was libraries or Rotary clubs or whatever, but he tries to do like 12 of them in a month or in 6 weeks or whatever. And
Smart.
I did that back in 2019. I did 35 talks in, I don't know, 3 months or something like that. My idea was to do 50 talks in a year, and then the
That's
pandemic
incredible.
hit.
Yes.
But yeah, it really, really, really helps because you don't get it's just like writing your emails, Laura. It's like when you are prolific, you don't get off the horse, you stay engaged, and every time I stop writing my emails, I think of you. Get back in there! Because there's something about being on the roll where you, um I'll give another example. One time I was on a hike in the Golan Heights in Israel when it was I don't think it's part of Israel anymore, but back in 1979 it was, and they didn't tell us, but we are gonna have to jump off a cliff into a gorge that was 3 stories deep, and I was like,
God.
ever, scared shitless? Well, it's a real thing. I mean, I had to find the nearest bush before I could handle this, and, but I managed to, get in line. I saw people do it in front of me. They survived, and I did it too, and of course, once you land, it's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe I did that. If only I could do it again."
Mhm.
And that day, we did have opportunities to do it again in a lesser height, but then it was like, never again, and now I'm back to being afraid of heights. But if I stayed with it, if I had
Yeah.
those people who are, like, with me, keeping it going and making it like a new experience, then I probably would be fine jumping off of a, three-story height into a body of water, even
Yes.
today.
Right.
But
No, that's
no.
absolutely true. No,
Mm.
but you're not. Yes.
But
Alas.
no,
Well,
not gonna
luckily,
happen.
it's not something that you need to do for your career success. So
That's right. That's
speaking,
right.
on the other hand, is very useful for
Right. Right, and if you can, do it in ways and in places where you feel it's relatively safe and fun, and it gives you a lot of that big high afterwards, that exhilaration of like, "Wow, it's one of the fun things I get to do."
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, I think we are out of time. I did notice that somebody made a comment that I wanted to share. Um, it's Rosa Brown said, "A wise friend told me to think of a comment like that, to treat it as an opportunity to learn a different perspective about yourself." Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so I think Rosa, you're referring to when we get negative comments, how to handle them. Mhm.
Yes. I think you have to consider the source. And I mean, I think I learned that my work can be misinterpreted, but I don't think that person's comment was reflective of something true about me. And so I always consider the source. Sometimes it's worth considering the criticism, that it is something to take in and wonder, like, is this true about me? Is that something worth thinking about? But sometimes it's not at all. Sometimes I don't think sometimes it is worth just dismissing and saying, like, this person has a problem. They're like doesn't really have anything to do with me. So it depends. Again, it depends on the source. And also, like back to your that tip that you picked up about saying, like, thank you for sharing a different, thank you for sharing your perspective, or being willing to share that. I think that is very gracious and kind. It's not me. I may do it once in a while, but I don't mean, if I say that, I don't mean it. It's not coming from the heart. It's an STFU is what
Uh-huh.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I hear you. So, what would you I mean, I kind of led you down a particular pathway here of things that I'm interested in terms of expressing ourselves, not caring what other people think, but, um, I guess, before we go, I just wanted to ask you one last question about what do you think allows people to, like, open up the spigot and be more prolific in their writing?
I think practicing that, giving it a try and seeing how powerful it is. Like, okay, I'm going to be prolific. I'm going to maybe giving yourself a challenge. I'm going to write something, write and publish something every day for 30 days, whether that's to your email list or on social media or a blog or something, some form. And being on that streak is so, enlivening and encouraging. It makes you want more. It makes you see how mu like, the great things that come out of it that you wouldn't have created otherwise. It's like, "Wow, thank goodness I did that. I would never have written this thing that, changed people's minds, that hit so big, or that I'm so proud of." There great things come out of going on being on a streak and creating every day and treating it lightly, treating holding each thing that you're making lightly, but you can do when you're doing something every day.
I
There's
love
way
that.
less weight on it. There's way less pressure. Like, this has to be perfect and it has to be great and it has to go viral, damn it. You don't feel that way when you're pumping out something every
Yes.
day.
Yes, and that's the same thing about, like, doing more speaking, is like you hold it lightly. I love that you said that. Um, okay, I do have another question, but I'm just gonna go for it. You mentioned something about showing different sides of yourself.
Mhm.
I don't know if I heard it. I might have heard it, in another podcast, possibly, but I know that sometimes people think that they always have to show themselves a certain way. Do you think that's true? Do you think it's like, what's your view? Do you feel like you bring out different parts of yourself
Yeah,
different
sure.
times?
And I think, if you talk about your true authentic self, like as if there's one self that is true to you, I think that that's in a way, a falsehood, because we have different sides of ourselves that come out with different people or different. You have a side of yourself that comes out. I mean, mine isn't necessarily authentic or natural, but if I'm talking to a little kid, I don't know, that's my true self, but that's my talking to a kid self. Another side that comes out if I am um, say, nurturing, mentoring a group of people in shrimp club. I am a different me there, and it's not me. It's not a not true me. It's just a different me where I'm being in a leader position and encouraging people. And then a different me that is like that only comes out around my husband. Like that's there, there's a me that
Hopefully.
only sees and knows. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Well, even clothed and not in the bedroom. He like I'll say things to him that I wouldn't say to anybody else. We have sort of a shorthand and our own language
Yes.
that we share, and
Yes.
jokes that are absolutely inappropriate, even with our very best friends. So, and
Yes.
then there's a me that comes out around my best friend. There's a me that comes out around a new friend. So they're all
Mm.
different sides of us.
Yeah.
There's no
Yes.
one true person.
Yes, and I think that's one of the things, that I also think a lot about, and also speak some in the book about what is it natural, which one is the natural me? Yes,
Yeah.
they're all
I
they're all us.
I think when you are not being yourself. At least I do. I feel like I have a hangover from it.
Mhm.
Like I'll remember a laugh that was too loud, that was forced, you know what I mean? I'm like, "I didn't think that was so funny." Or
Yeah,
after an evening with somebody that just doesn't bring out the real me, where I feel myself saying things that I don't mean, because they're boring. I'll have a hangover the next day from that, like just
yeah,
a fakeness hangover.
yeah, yeah, I call that speaker's remorse. Yeah, but yeah, and I think this is why I have a nighttime ritual that I do of 5 things I feel proud of myself for from the day and 5 things that I forgive myself for, and those kinds of things would go in that second category. Yeah.
That's good.
So, Laura, anything that you want to leave our listeners with today?
Oh, I wanna leave them wanting to buy my book, so go get I think you will love it. If you are here listening to this and you're one of Linda's people, you will love Tough Titties. If you're one of my people, you will love Tough Titties. If you are buttoned up and straight-laced and a prude, you probably won't love Tough Titties, but otherwise, go get it. It is at toughtittiesbook.com, and there are incredible pre-order bonuses if you're interested in writing, pumping up your writing skills. I have brand new writing courses that I'm offering as bonuses, as well as the intro chapter, as well as a replay of this call I did on the whole book process, the whole book journey. If you're interested in writing a book, you want that. So head over there, grab those bonuses. They are going to disappear on Pub Day, which is June 13th. So now is the time to grab them.
Yes. So exciting. I have to say I'm a little bit prudish in some ways. I thought it was still worth reading.
Thank you. Good. A little bit prudish it can work for, and
I
I
was
am too, by the way. Like, there are certain things I don't wanna hear people talk about, especially in a business setting. That's not a business setting, it's a memoir. It's a memoir and essays, but I too feel like, yeah, I didn't wanna hear that. I didn't wanna know that about them."
Yeah. So Tough Titties, go get it. It's coming out in 2 weeks. Get the bonuses, so buy it now. Laura, so great talking to you. I'm so glad to have been able to ask you all these questions I've been wanting to ask you about and just hear what you have to say. I feel like I've had a little, like, private talk here, even though, other people have been on. Thank you so much for everyone who has come on live, and if you're watching the replay, we'll be back next week or the week after. We're, going to be having, a friend of ours, Terry Trespicio, on.
Ah, the best.
The best, yeah, and, so excited for that too. Keep your eyes out, and in the meantime, I am wishing you delight in the limelight.